Thank you, everyone. My name's Stefan Kaufmann. I'm part of the MSDI seminar team, and I work with Behaviour Works and the research team at Monash. This topic's quite dear to my heart. I'm very interested in the interface between behaviour change and transitions, and Christoph's work sits very much in that space. I'll tell you a little bit about how we got in touch with Christoph, but first I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the country which we're speaking from. For me, that's the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation. I think it's particularly appropriate to note their contribution, given that we're on Monday we were a year from the failed referendum attempt to recognise their voice to Parliament, and I think particularly given Christoph's topic, we have so much to learn from Indigenous Australia in terms of what does a co-equilibrium of social, economic and environmental systems look like if it's given time to co-evolve over a very long time. And from a certain way of looking at it, the challenge we have today in sustainability is trying to recreate that kind of co-equilibrium in a globalized socio-technical context, and the kinds of tools and methods that Christoph will be sharing, I think, are very key to trying to do that. So I think it's particularly appropriate to acknowledge the traditional owners and the wisdom that we've stolen ourselves from disrupting all of that when White Australia came in. But into the topic of today itself. So Christoph and I had some light correspondence in response to some mutual admiration for papers we'd written in the behaviour and transitions work and his work on modelling. And he's also submitted a paper to a special issue that Rob and myself and some collaborators, Paul and Paula from Germany and the Netherlands, have been editing around transitions and behaviour. And it's particularly exciting because our earlier review really identified the need to better understand how behaviour change can be represented in efforts to model transitions and in policy areas. And this is the kind of work that Chris does. And so we were keen to hear from him and hear a bit more about his work, and then reached out to him and invited him after those initial contacts. And Chris is at the Leibniz Center in Dresden. He's got a few slides where he'll tell you a bit more about his background, probably more eloquently than I can, but very much looking forward to hearing about your work, Christoph, and over to you. And in terms of, sorry, before it's over to you, in terms of process, feel free to add questions to the chat as we go. I'll help corral that. I believe some of you might be in the room there with Rob. I'm not sure if there's a crowd behind you, Rob, or not. But if not, then we'll okay, great. Then we'll mostly do questions online then. So post questions online. I'll do a little bit of curating of that at the end after Christoph talks for 20 to 30 minutes. And then hopefully we'll have a rich and rewarding discussion from there. So over to you, Christoph.
Okay, thanks, Stefan, for the nice invitation and possibility to exchange my work and our findings here. So I will share my screen, and hopefully it will be soon in the presentation mode.
Yeah, that's coming through, but in your notes, yeah, that's it.
Is it? Okay, good. Okay.
Looks good.
Okay, yeah, today I want to give an overview, nothing more, and of course in 30 minutes, of incorporating human behavior in complex system modeling, how we understand it, and how we are seeing it also directly for policy assessment, and want to give a comparison of approaches we see. And of course, that will be not complete, so I'm interested in the discussion part. So to my person, I'm a physicist, had a lot of different stations until I reached the IRER, my institute today. And I'm there a senior scientist since 2019. My main topics and interests are, let's say, in the past decades after making my PhD in organic solar cells, are building performance simulations with overheating of buildings and heat adaptation concepts, natural ventilation concepts, and determination of energy demand. So everything you can do with advanced building performance simulation, and of course dealing with sustainable buildings and renewable energies in the field. So that's my, let's say, more or less old topic. And the newer topic I jumped in is about system dynamics, so system modeling in the broad, and system thinking, also having a look on agent-based modeling or the other techniques to understand complex systems and to understand transformation and transition dynamics. I'm also very interested in behavior change modeling. However, I'm, let's say, more or less into the topic since 2 years. And I have a very strong interest in participatory modeling because I like this approach very much by I will explain you later why this is so. About our institute, the institute I'm working on is the Leibniz Institute of Ecological, Urban and Regional Development in Dresden, Germany. Yeah, the city where the bridges clashes. We have 4 different research areas. Just very short to give you an overview what we are doing. So the first one is transformative capacities, which is all dealing with transformative changes, using different formats and different approaches to also analyze this in praxis, but also on a theoretical framework. The second one is landscape ecosystems and biodiversity, where everything is about landscape change, about ecology. And the third one is built environment, resources, and environmental risk, where I'm working on. So it's with circular economy and environmental risks, hazards, and so on. And this last one is on spatial informations and modeling, where I'm more or less, from my work, half in, but I belong to the third one in the environmental risk and resources. So I want to start with some policy modeling or policy advice. So any approaches which helps to get ex-ante information about policy effects, how it intervenes. And the classic approaches you have are more or less impact assessment, where you calculate the impact of policies for single different dimensions. So not really having too much, let's say, working them together, bringing them together. Then you have the cost benefits analysis, which calculates the costs and the benefits of a policy, which is mainly economic, but can be also ecological and social. You have the multi-criteria analysis, which considers weighing the different policy effects and making some assessment by this way. Then you have the broad, very, very broad and very often used field of expert feedback. So this can be very different by reports, interviews, workshops, or advanced methods like Delphi and citizen panels from science, government, and praxis. And you have the, more or less, I would say, still niche of considering complex impact of policies. So nonlinear dynamics, unintended side effects, and all of this. And I see they're embedded more or less for transition and transformation processes. So for policies who should deal with this, behavior public policy assessment is a very crucial point from my point of view, which is also, in my understanding, still a niche, at least in Germany. See forward to have your expertise in Australia, for example. So to analyze public policy impact in social and with this complex systems, there have a lot of two main requirements you have to make on approaches, especially when it goes to transformation and transition processes. So really unknown radical processes, perhaps. And this is the consideration of the complexity of the system you are intending to implement the policy. The other one is, of course, considering the impact on the actors. So direct social behavior, individual behavior, or also on the broader sense. And this leads you that you at the end have to deal with complex social systems and social with stars, or social, technical, ecological, and so on. But the social component, from my point of view, is very crucial there. Why system modeling is still a niche in policy advice, and I would also extend this perhaps to behavioral modeling. So the first one is that decision makers have the interest to reduce the complexity they deal with. On the other hand, the system modeler says, okay, we need it to deal with the complexity which is there in, let's say, a necessary way. The second one is that the decision makers often says, oh, I need precise forecast. And of course, the modeler says, oh, that's nice, but that's future. Who knows? It's complex, and I cannot tell you what the future is. I have scenarios, and that sometimes decision makers don't want to hear. It's also with climate projections in a very simple case. The third one is clear and understandable information. So of course, that's very important for decision makers who have less time. And on the other hand, the modeler should not show them, for example, the causal loop diagram and says, here, have a look. So this should be very, very much translated into understandable and easy to follow results. And the latter one, of course, also not small. They have to react quickly and mainly have no extra financial capacities. And of course, the modeling needs time and money, and time especially, and money especially when it comes to quantitative system modeling. So as I recognize about modeling complexity, I'm go very quick through to get to the core statements, because most of them which are here are familiar with this. So we have also in the paper printed an overview of how to get these system approaches a bit divided from qualitative to quantitative modeling, from aggregated to detailed. And you see here, without going too much into detail, that you have different approaches which are qualitative and aggregated, like the whole toolbox of system thinking, which are aggregated but quantitative, so going deeper into the system analysis, like system dynamics, and agent-based modeling on the right side, because it mostly concentrates on heterogeneous individual behavior. And then you have, of course, other things like social network analysis, stochastic models, and the broad field of data-driven empirical models, where they don't have more or less the equations behind it, but the connections of input and output. So qualitative system modeling approaches mainly originate from system thinking, which is a very broad field and which focuses on the system interrelationships and nonlinearity of systems. So it does go beyond the approach that most of us or most of our decisions are more or less linear, but should be, of course, circular, interconnected, emergent, and taking the system as a whole, as parts, and also synthesize the deep analysis, of course, we also need in the system, and see their relationships. So methods of the system thinking toolbox are the most easiest one: concept maps or mind maps, then causal loop diagrams and fuzzy cognitive mapping, something in between qualitative and quantitative system modeling. So the causal loop diagram is the thing I'm seeing from the system thinking perspective. There's a lot of discussion on system dynamics that belongs to system dynamics, so you can see it as you want. But that's why I put it to system thinking. It's a qualitative system modeling approach. It reveals the interdependencies between system variables and analyzes the system structure, and is very much about finding, reinforcing, and balancing feedback loops to describe the behavior which a system might have. Of course, in a qualitative way, but this technique can be used very quickly also to see unintended side effects. It visualizes where policies intervene in a system, which can be quite helpful to see if policies only, for example, intervene in one spot in the system or at several spots, which gives you a first hint that their effect would be different, and also which feedback loop they are changing. And having a very, very simple example with this, we have here this example of green gentrification, which is explained that in a quarter, so in a district, the attractiveness for the residents, if this goes up, the rental prices will go up. This will lead to or force the low household incomes to move out. So the vacancy is going up. And with this, of course, the higher the vacancy, the lower the attractiveness of the quarter. So this is a balancing feedback loop. But the problem is you have, of course, also the persons who have high household incomes, and they will move, of course, into this quarter because they can afford it. And with the higher attractiveness, more residents with high households come in. The vacancy in the quarter goes up and then down, and then the attractiveness is rising again. And if you don't take any policies or any, let's say, interventions, you end up that the green quarter is mainly consists of high household incomes, which was not the case before. So getting to the other side of system modeling, so really doing it quantitatively and with system dynamics modeling, agent-based modeling, also simulations, so time-resolved analysis. You have the aim that you have nonlinear time-resolved dynamics can be understood in complex systems, but using, of course, scenarios. So you could set this, and under this and this conditions, this might happen. So system dynamics modeling can be seen as an extension of the causal loop diagram. It focuses on system interrelations and especially the time-resolved nonlinear system dynamics. Agent-based modeling simulates the more or less discrete behavior, and which is, of course, mainly heterogeneous, so of agents, which can be individual persons or groups, and their interactions. So it's much more detailed in system dynamics, which, of course, implies that you need also the data, so the decision models, to be quite precise, that they predict the realistic behavior and not something which is not realistic. And you can see policies here in such models as a shock. So a shock which drives the system hopefully in the right direction, but of course can also be the other way around, or which is also often happen, doesn't have any effect on the system at all. And on the right side, you see what I mean with these system shocks. So you have the information and economic regulatory policy, and you see that the dynamics is, of course, non-linear at all. But with this, I come in a few minutes a bit deeper into this. So now I come to the first part of, let's say, telling how system modeling can be used to include behavior. So not really using a system model to make a behavior model out of it, but to how to incorporate the social behavior component into system modeling when it comes to policy advice or policy modeling, and when it comes to transition and transformation of systems. So this we compared in the paper, which was mentioned also by Stefan, we compared 3 system models, including behavior change. And that was a qualitative causal loop diagram, a system dynamics model, and an agent-based model, more or less agent-based model concept. Because we want to show how different these approaches can handle with this issue. The hypothetical case study was an implementation of the spontaneity adaptation measures in urban districts. And the boundaries conditions were that it is an existing residential quarter with apartment buildings. The owner of the districts is a real estate company. The residents are tenants, and the transformation should look a bit like the graphics below. So transforming such a urban quarter into a sponge city concept quarter. So that, of course, belongs to different fields. So it's like innovation diffusion. It's it addresses social technical systems, so sustainability transition, behavior change modeling, public policy modeling, complex system modeling, and so on and so on. So only to address this issue, you can take a lot of information of very, very different theories and approaches to deal with. In this paper, we made it very, very simple. So the model is nothing to use in the real policy modeling, but we want to show how we should to make it as a showcase to compare the 3 modeling approaches. So with starting with the causal loop diagram, the CLD as a qualitative modeling technique, you see here in the center the motivation of the real estate company to implement adaptation measures, which belongs to the spontaneity concept. And when they are implementing it, the adaptive capacity of the quarter for droughts and heavy rains goes up. And then, of course, the costs which are damaged, which are caused by the extreme events. And with this, the effectiveness, and you have the first balancing feedback loop. And with this, you have several balancing feedback loops, which all goes through the motivation process of the real estate company. And then you can ask, what impact does this have on the tenants? And to make it short, I explained it to you a few minutes ago. It is going like green gentrification, because it has the higher green share in the quarter, because it is more resilient to droughts and heavy rain, raises the attractiveness, and with this the rental price goes up and you have this green gentrification problem. So this effect, of course, will induce certain pressure of the city on the city government to support the real estate company to implement adaptation measures. And without going too much into details, we visualize an economic policy, and legal or regulatory policy, and an informational policy. And all of them are leading to additional feedback loops, which is quite important because that changes the dynamics. But for example, the regulatory leading to two very different feedback loops, one balancing and one reinforcing, which is that the reinforcing one, which making the problem even worse, is that, even worse, correct, that the motivation, if the motivation of the real estate company is too low, and it is forced more or less by the city government or by another governmental level to implement adaptation measurement, it can bypass the regulation. Like, okay, I do it, but not in a good quality, or I try to do it not, and nobody hopefully gets controlling this. So that's an effect which you can visualize also with such approaches to have a look how policies might act. As I said, that's a very simple model, and only more or less to visualize what is the conceptual idea when we talk about policy implementation into causal loop diagrams and system modeling. The more advanced technique, as I said, is of course the quantitative system dynamics model, so the simulation model. This one here is only made on droughts. You see the structure is of course similar, but changed with stocks and flows. And also that we have here impulse and intensities of the economic policies as input parameters. And with this, as I said, the results are not true at all, because that are very simplistic quantifications, which without deep validations and so on, it's just to show what effects there are in the system and how the system behaves. You can see that the drought events, with the drought events starting in 2015, which is quite the case for Germany, the intact green space in the quarter goes down, and with this, the attractiveness for the tenants. And with this, you change the number of tenants with higher income, which are getting lower, and the poorer income are getting up. And if you now implement each 5 years going information, economic, regulatory policy, so very hypothetical and very scientific, to be honest, you see that of course the green share is going a bit up because adaptation measures are implemented in a different way. And with this also the share of rich and poor household incomes are changing differently to the first case. So that's how we see such approaches can be used. As I said, the model is, of course, only a showcase. The third one is the agent-based model. What we're thinking about? We thought, if you have a look here on this, we make it ourselves very simple. We said, oh, we have rich ones, we have poor ones, and they are all behaving the same. This is, of course, not the case. This, for example, tenants, you have very different milieu. So you have so you have the Dinos milieu, which we use in Europe or Germany quite often, that divides the society in 10 parts, describing with different behavior rules, typical behavior rules. And you can do this very much in agent-based modeling, where you not have individual as agents, but the group. So the Sinus milieu group 1 as agent 1, and so on up to agent 2. You have the real estate company as an agent, and the city government as an agent. And then you implement the policies, and the policies leads to the effect that the tenants relocate or not. So how I see agent-based modeling in this case, and also in general, is that it might be acting as a lens for system analysis. So with system dynamics and causal loop diagrams, you get the real aggregated overview. So an overview how the system works, how it should behave. And if you have, let's say, a point in the system where you see, oh, this is very heterogeneous, you cannot really do this as with one stock or two stocks, then perhaps agent-based modeling is the right opportunity to get a lens, so deep dive into this area of the system and building agent-based modeling, agent-based model. However, this all sounds very nice, but the reality is quite different because how individual behavior or societal behavior is modeled in system models is mostly very simple with ad hoc assumptions. So assumptions which are more or less out of our mental models or out of any stakeholder involvement, and says the decision making of the actors in the model is like this, without telling, okay, that's based on such psychological theory or economic theory. The second one is that the economic behavioral theories you can use, which are there, the theory of expected utility or prospect theory and other theories, which mostly to handle humans as rational or egoistic and very important with full information, which is of course not true at all. Also there, of course, are newer theories, but you can, let's say, take theories from the economic, but also from, and which is found very interesting, social psychological theories. So theories of planned behavior, protection, motivation theory, the Rubicon model, and so on. So different approaches which are there. And of course, you can also use empirical methods, which are basing on machine learning, artificial intelligence, neural networks. This, I think, is also an emerging field, which is quite important. Of course, yeah, there you have then the problem with ethical issues and also data protection, which you should, as scientists, be aware of. You have two major challenges with this. The first challenge is that the psychological variables in system models are often very subjective model parameters. This is because the theories above have no real mathematical formalization included. They are more or less concepts to explain how a decision is made. The second one is that large time effort for the quantification, especially of soft system variables, is needed. So if you have social variables and you have to quantify them, then you need, for example, social empirical methods which need time for questionnaires or something like this, or to involve stakeholders. And this will never lead to sharp decision rules because it's not sure, for example, if the persons answered really what they would do if this would be the real case in a questionnaire. So then I will come to the behavior system modeling. So really modeling transformative decisions using system thinking, system dynamics, and in brackets not ABM, because agent-based modeling is, I think, here the more common way. But I see STM, especially STM, as very promising because it can visualize what happens quite good. And with this, I want to come to the second showcase, which is the energetic renovation or energetic retrofitting of single-family houses, multi-family houses in cities, and to handle with the direct decision process. And the problem is in Germany, and I think that's not only in Germany the case, that we have too low energetic renovation dynamics to meet the climate mitigation goals. And the modeling process to analyze these decision process, why this is the case, is that we have first of all literature of the review of the barriers and chances for energetic retrofitting. That we have a review, of course, on these theories which are used in this context or in similar contexts from social psychological field. Then we created a first draft of the CLD for the single family house owners and extend this to private housing companies and for the hardest work on homeowners association. Then, a very important point, we have a bilateral experts interview with 14 experts with very different expertise, which are looking on this direct CLD, which I explained in the video, which was quite helpful. and are now in the revisions of the CLD. And the next step would be to make online questionnaires which are based on the CLD structure to ask the right questions and to see what feedback loops are dominant in the system, because there are a lot. And of course, at the end, the aim of the whole issue is that we implement policies and make a policy paper out of this to see how the different homeowners types, so the single family house owners up to homeowner association, should be perhaps handled differently in policy development. And the outlook, perhaps we create also a system dynamic simulation model, which was the first idea, but when I saw the lot of social variables, I'm a bit afraid of doing this. So let's see how this works, but not in this project. So mapping a decision process and realization process of the ER, I want to give a short overview. So we start with the HO, it's homeowners not interested for the energetic retrofitting, and they should be motivated by where the three different major parts go in, and that is specific external causes to make an energetic retrofitting, the own attitudes towards it, and the perceived social norms, which I found very important in this case. So if all goes right, you end up with homeowners interested in energetic renovation. Also important is the social relevance in the society of this topic, perceived complexity, and very important, which we found, is the word of mouth effect. The second step is that the homeowners are weighing the benefits and costs against or for energetic retrofitting. So you have a concrete feasibility check, and the homeowners determined for energetic retrofitting at the end. Then you do the detailed planning, where for me the focus is not in the model, but we have it included because this is very interesting and has a very there the effect is very strong if you really do this. So if you can afford it, if you have the planning there, and if you have attractive offers to do so. At the end, the realization is affected by, of course, the availability of planners, craftsmen, buildings, materials, and by the refurbishment duration. And sorry, very important, the variable on the upper one, the satisfaction of the homeowners with the result. So the, let's say, feedback, how at the end they are satisfied with the ER process. And you can belong these steps to the Rubicon model of motivation action phases, where we see the most correlating. And the first phase is weighting the pros and cons on two different stages. Then you have the Rubicon you have to overcome. And then you have the second phase of detailed planning, of realization and acting. And then, very important, the assessment of the results, so the reflection issue. And we focus in this work then on more or less the social psychological factors. That is the system map like it looks now. So I don't want to go into detail because it's also really a current state of work. It's not complete. It's the rework of the feedback of the interviews, of the feedbacks from the interviews. And with this, we want to make it, of course, then more simplistic and really use it for policy advice, where we implement then the policies as I showed before. So the last short excerpt is on participatory system modeling creation, because I use this technique and I like this very much because of different causes. And the first one you can see here on the right side with the blind man and the elephant, where the different experts here are investigating different parts of the system elephant are coming to, of course, wrong conclusions. And if they would bring their expertise, their system knowledge together, they would perhaps and hopefully describe the system elephant much better. And nothing else should go on in such a workshop, such a group model building workshop. Stakeholders should include their knowledge to draw together a causal loop diagram, which hopefully is a much better representation than doing it on your own with your own mental and limited model. The advantages, as I said, is that you implement different system knowledge into the model, and also, very important, that you get a high acceptance of the model. Because if you take decision makers into it, or at least the counseling of decision makers, the trust in the model is increasing significantly. And it's also an opportunity to quantify the model or semi-quantify the model. Disadvantages are, of course, as general in such issues, time, and that the facilitator quality is extremely crucial, and which is really hard, that results depend on the selected individual participants. That's why this is very important. In group model building, the process steps are the first one. So identifying the problem sounds trivial, but it is not. It's very important that you don't run into a system model you don't want to have. Then analyzing the relevant stakeholders, experts, and citizen science involved in the problem. Then you start with the first workshop. I think, so in my case, it's with 10 persons around 3 hours. And you make a joint identification of the relevant factors affecting the system by the workshop. So like it is in the upper right. Then you're jointly creating a causal loop diagram to find the feedback loops. This is the hardest case at the end, because all the participants think, okay, now we see it's complex, and yet. And then you, as a modeler, go into your office and identify the feedback loops, read the story which are in the system, and then at the end end up with a third workshop where you find the leverage points and interventions and make perhaps some suggestions for effective policies or strategies. Of course, system dynamic simulation model can be an extension on this, but this is, as I said before, the case. That's not a must, but it can. So summarizing my talk, the take-home message I hope you get from the talk are that behavioral public policy modeling is very important to understand how policies and strategies might change an existing system. It is, of course, not clear. That's not no prediction. It's like projections in the climate modeling, but it's extremely helpful to know what unknown future can come. So I think this is very important, and this is done very, very too low, especially for such issues which are focusing transition and transformation processes. System models can consider the complexity of social technical systems and take into account behavior modeling as modules, for example. The qualitative system models, like causal loop diagrams, are opening windows to visualize psychological variables that trigger behavior change. So it's really only qualitative, but I think that helps very much if you compare this to only the social psychological theories to see what is going on in the system, also with the feedback loops which are there. Quantitative system models like ABM and SDM as a time-resolved extension for deeper analysis are also very good to have an overview of perhaps also leverage points on tipping points. The challenge is, of course, to quantify the system variables, which can be extremely time intense. And advances of the combinations, as I said, we see SDM a bit as a lens with the bottom-up approach compared to the top-down approach of SDM. And with this, I want to show you a quick overview of the fact sheet we have. So the fact sheet we made from the Polymod project, which is available in German and English, and tries to get an overview how these modeling methods of complex and social impacts can be used for policy advice. It's around 15 pages. And also these 2 journal papers where I take the most content of the presentation today. And with this, I want to like to thank you for your attention and looking forward to the discussions. So thank you. I would stop screen sharing.
Thank you, Chris. Please join me in thanking Chris, everyone. You're clapping or visual or not. There's not a heap of questions in the comments, or there is one, and I'm sure there's ones on the tips of people's tongues. I might jump in with the chair's privilege first of all. So one perhaps pessimistic reading of your presentation is that on the one hand we have the option of developing rigorous but maybe ultimately flawed models that try and provide anticipatory evidence about what the likely effect of something might be and so on. But there may be diminishing returns, I guess, in how much rigor and effort we put into getting it right, because the old truism of all models are wrong, but some are useful and so on. Then on the other
Exactly.
hand, there's also, I think, a very strong narrative around systems thinking in general, but I think also around group model building process and the like, that they're an opportunity for a group of diverse stakeholders to form that shared picture, understand the interdependencies and agree on what might be a useful forward action. So they're almost an intervention, and the process itself might be really important for gaining agreement and collective action on a problem. And so I guess what I'm curious about from you is, of those two scenarios, which do you think is the, I mean, I'm probably a bit biased, I think you can hear from the way I framed that, it's the second one, but which one of those do you think is the most exciting direction for integrating systems approaches and particularly behavioral understandings? Is it developing better an analysis and understanding, with all the good things that could come from that, even if there are those limitations? Or should we be thinking of it as a tool for intervention? And if so, would we do it a bit differently than we would for the purpose of generating knowledge? Is that
Mm.
making sense?
It's making complete sense, and it's a very important question because I'm also thinking for myself in which direction to go further. Because the second one, as you mentioned, to let's say taking it for collective action to get the decision makers a bit more into systemic thinking and so on, I think is very crucial, and I would see this as a first stage. And the second stage is so the first stage you mentioned is nothing. So I see it in the same, let's say, importance. Because we know very less about how decisions are made still. So that's my feeling. Can be wrong because I'm only 2 years into it, but from my understanding, with transformation processes, so really dealing with, let's say, also fear and so on, we know not too much about it. So I think from this perspective, this is quite important. On the other one hand, to really use also this system modeling perhaps as an extension, which can give a bit more answers perhaps in this field. And the first one is for me, or second one from you. So these collective action and stakeholder engagement is very important to get the trust into such techniques, which are of course much better than only expert exchange by, let's say, a meeting or something like this, because they can also I had a talk with on Monday with Jose Gonzalez from Norway, with Strategy Finder. And it's amazing what progress you can make in a very short time, which absolutely goes beyond normal meetings where some expert is telling, oh, that is important. Oh, yeah, maybe. So really getting the knowledge collected and also changing the thinking. So the thinking not really only focusing on the case like physicists do, for example, getting very deep into one topic and dealing with this, but really getting the overview. So if you make a policy, be aware that you have a lot of side effects which you can trigger with this. So I would really find both things quite important in a similar way. So I'm not completely with you to take the second one, but I find both things very, very important for transformation and transition science. Yeah.
It sounds like we'd agree that there's maybe a sequential nature to doing the two approaches, and that you should
would
be
be the
very
best
clear about
case.
which one you're doing when you're doing one or the other. Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe before we go to some of the verbal questions, we'll just address the written one that was put up earlier. So that was, I believe, asking how important is it to have quantitative modeling expertise or quantitative skills to do different forms of group modeling and causal loop diagramming and so on. You got a quick response for that one?
Yeah, so for the causal loop diagrams, you don't need such issues. I think it's quite helpful sometimes if you make a stock flow diagram out of this, because then you see which system variable you might forget, or which is also important to describe the system. So, but that's also not quantitative. It's just a step that you change your CLD to a stock flow diagram where you have really the stocks, the flows, and also the connections into it in focus, which is perhaps a better description than a normal CLD. So that's why I like this more than normal CLD where all are variables. But for such group model building expertise and to lead such workshops, you don't need a quantification or be a simulation expert or something like this. And I would say it's something between science and art, because you have to be, as a facilitator, very much social skilled with taking all, let's say participating all in the same way and the same content, and not only letting this person speak who is the loudest one. But also for these things, I think this group model building is quite helpful, because in the starting with, when you write down the system variables from every participant and tell everyone has to write 5, then you have a very good start that everybody is taking part into the model. That's a good start, which is perhaps for a normal meeting not the case, where the introverted persons are, of course, the quietest, and the extroverted are the loudest ones.
Yeah, that makes sense, and that certainly accords with my experience. I might add to that if you do want to convert the causal loop diagram into a more quantitative analysis, it's a very good idea to have an idea of where that goes. That's something I've encountered as a bit of a limitation, that if you don't attend to those aspects of it, what you produce might not be appropriate for it. Yeah, I think Miriam, you might have been the first with a hand up.
Thank you, Christoph. Good to hear from another German in the space. And also for the I loved the slide about the problem of getting system done models of any kind out there, and the constant struggle between data, time, and budget. Beautiful. I'm going to be very transparent. I'm on the chapter. I'm on the policy council for the Australian Society of System Dynamics, so probably have a few years ahead of you in terms of experience. There was a couple of things around how you cut the different methods. So I was really curious where that came from, because you said that in the system dynamics model, which so for us, causal loop diagrams and participatory modeling are in the same school of thought. They're all part of system dynamics, and stock and flow diagrams usually are the ones that are quantifiable and then can be created into simulation models. And I was really curious about the perception that we would only model assumptions, because I think one thing that system dynamics claims to do is, and I'm not arguing it does, I'm mainly using qualitative for similar reasons. But one thing it does do is model perceptions, and actually as part of a group model building process, when you then build a quantitative model, you actually work with the people and trying to model what they say. So I was really curious where that came from, and what your thinking is around that. Also to just bring that back to my society and say, you're rubbish in explaining this.
Do you mean that I let's say let CLD belong to system thinking?
So I think you said system dynamics is just the quantitative. So system dynamics is also CLD. And then, because I think there was a slide 21, I think it was around the assumptions that a modeler would only model assumptions. Whereas rightly, as you said, when you bring in the participants and talk with them, which has all the benefits, I guess, of the Donna Meadows intervention scale, that you can actually change their mental model in the process of creating the model. So double win. So I was just curious where that came from.
So it came from that from me. So there is a lot discussion system dynamics, that a system dynamics model is only a system dynamics model when it's quantified and when it's a simulation model at the end, which I really don't like, because you can learn a lot of a CLD. And the CLD for me is very hard because it belongs to both. It's say the top end of system thinking, and it's the lower end of system dynamics. So from my understanding and my research, and I like Donella Meadows a lot because, with the leverage points and so on, she made really great things. And I see it in this case, especially for the group model building, for example, which is system dynamics, how you can draw, for example, the CLD with system dynamics. You have a mixture in between, but I will really see it as system thinking, because I take this and also in the report and so on, because that's a qualitative technique at the end. If you end up with a CLD, that's qualitative, and system thinking approaches are more or less mainly qualitative in the case, and that's why I cut there. Of course, knowing that there is a huge discussion where system dynamics starts and ends, but yeah, that was the reason why we put it, let's say, to system thinking more or less. But you can make also a slash and say system dynamics. So it's
yeah, and I think they're actually sort of blending.
Of
They're
course,
not actually
there's no fixed line or something like this or border. It's really going from one to another stages.
Sounds to me like you're in furious agreement. You're talking to experts when the really fine distinctions really matter. I might move to, Miriam, are you satisfied? Can we move to Rob?
Yeah, I was just wanting to make one call on the last statement you made about the qualitative CLD part. So in the system dynamics field, we always say make a quantitative model first and then turn it into a CLD, because that will actually tell you exactly what it is. And I'm very much in furious agreement with you, Chris, so that I think you can just start with the causal loop diagram because it's much more accessible for a lot of people.
Yeah,
so I just wanted
the problem, and to be realistic, it's made much faster. It's so much faster to make a CLD and perhaps put a stock flow diagram on top. But really making a simulation model in, let's say, 1 or 2 years and ending up with a CLD, you cannot do it in policy advice. That's what I'm arguing. And also this distinction is for policy advice. That's why we do it like this.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Rob, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, thanks. I'll try and be brief, given that there are 2 other questions and 5 minutes left. I'm interested in the relationship between these modeling approaches and these questions around transitions and transformation. The way I understand it, I worked with modelers in the past, but I'm not a modeler myself. But the way I understand it, you collect the material, whether that's through systematic reviews, or you talk to experts, or you do these participatory workshops in order to construct a model of a system. And then you can play around with policy interventions to try and see how you can improve the outcomes of that system in a direction that you wanted to improve in. In part of my mind then says, but that's about systems optimization, because we actually still doing the policy interventions within unchanged systems, because the causal loop diagrams remain the same. Or in agent-based modeling, the rules that guide actors' behaviors remains the same. So is there a way in which these models can, like, is there a gap between the intentions and the way these models operate versus actually thinking about transformation and fundamentally changing the ways these systems are working? Does that make sense?
Yeah, this makes sense. So you are talking about, let's say, that the policy change the system structure, and with this system behavior, and make radical changes and transformative changes. That you can also do with this. Up to now, perhaps on my limited mind and loaded with the past, I have not found such issues, especially for these paper, let's say, Sponge City CLD. But I'm curious to see it in the so in the second one with energetic renovations. And we not only have the intention, let's say, to put there this policy is going, this one is going, but really to see from the model itself, okay, this feedback loop here is bad. This is really not helping, and how we can, for example, get this feedback loop off the system, so out of the system. And this would be the case where you are talking. And so not only changing existing systems to make it a bit more optimal, which don't changes the fundamental problems which we deal and which we are talking about transformation processes, but also to think about really changing the system structure by policies, for example. So we have both in mind, not only the, let's say, not so important issue of putting their policy in there, but really of perhaps getting much further and saying, okay, if we, for example, use different conditions on policies, how they work, we end up in a very different dynamics. So hopefully both.
That sounds really exciting, Christoph.
Yeah, let's see what in reality comes out, but that's our aim.
Won't need another special issue. Cameron, I see you've got your hand up still. Noting we've got 3 minutes too.
Okay, well, thanks, Stefan. I'll make it very quick. Well, thanks, Christoph, for the presentation. I'm also a system dynamics modeler, and we have a project next year which will be looking at sort of social and political dynamics of sustainability transitions and bringing those sorts of dynamics into our modeling. And I'm just sort of thinking ahead to some, obviously we're going to have a lot of challenges in trying to do that. We have an existing model, which is sort of a large scale, national scale macroeconomic type model, integrated model. And, we can model the impact of policies, and some policies, I guess they're easy to quantify, say economic policies around subsidies and the effects that they have on the cost of technology and, cost parity, tipping points and these sorts of things. I'm just wondering, in terms of other policies and, other innovations that aren't necessarily technological, say dietary change or things like that, and policies that are more sort of informational type policies, that change knowledge and awareness, how do you go about estimating the impact of those policies on behavior change? And if you've come across any good ways of doing that in your research.
So for example, the energetic retrofitting model, it shows at the first view, if you have a look on this, that, let's say, the economic incentives and so on are not the major driving force. It's just, of course, one, let's say, for a policy mix, which is the most suitable way that you do policy mix. This information and awareness and acceptance, especially acceptance that this is, for example, getting hip, so getting good and well, let's say, discussed to make energetic renovation. That's cool. That's funny stuff at the end, to be a bit overwhelming. That is extremely important because of the word of mouth propaganda, innovation, diffusion issues, and so on. So I see this point, for example, very important, and I hope that this also will come out of the model, but until this stage I cannot tell. But that's why we divide, as I showed in the very simple case of the sponge city. We divide it also in this informational, in the regulatory, and into the economic policies, because they are working very different in the system model. So on the motivation process. And yeah, with this, but at the end, I'm very curious to see how we can picture, for example, policy mixes in this case. Yeah, especially for a qualitative model.
Okay, well, wow, what a great discussion, and thanks for all the excellent questions and the excellent presentation too, Christoph. I take it you're happy for people to pepper you with emails and so on later on, and I'll certainly be arranging a follow-up chat with Christoph, so if anyone wants to join me with that in a group discussion, please let me know. And you've already shared your slides. Are you happy for me to share the version that you've given us, or would you like to send a redacted version?
I would put the appendix out and the one slide with the overwhelming CLD, which is a work in progress, but the rest, of course, we can share. Yes.
Okay, well, I'll wait for that version.
I will send you a version.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thanks everyone. That was really great. Look forward to the next discussion in this space.